Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. My name is Josh Weesey. I'm your host, and I am excited to bring you this show for over 2 years now. It is December 9th, 2018. That's when I'm recording this intro. We turned 2 years old on December 6th. It's a throwback to episode 1 with Tristan Lowe. So really excited that you all have been listening this long and keeping this show alive. Really appreciate that. This episode here I'm really excited about. We have Vipe Desai on, and he is a marketing expert. He knows pretty much everybody in the industry. He knows Ken Block, Rob Dyrdek. He was former director of marketing at Monster Energy. He's worked on Red Bull's early campaigns, like tons of good stuff here. So glad you could join us today. First off, I want to tell you a little bit about AMSOIL though. So AMSOIL and I are bringing you the show. We want to make sure that you have the right information to make good decisions about your sponsorship program. Today, I want to tell you about a story that I had with AMSOIL. So I've just run out of time in my life recently to do a lot of my normal maintenance stuff. But I had already bought all my oil for my sled, and I was like, well, I still need to get something to work on it. I got to get ready for winter. I can't come into winter without a sled ready. So I got my 4-stroke Arctic Cat 1100 turbo, and I got my AMSOIL, and I basically just called up my local dealer, which is Liters RPM in Kalamazoo. They sponsored Impact Fuel for almost a year, so I still use them for everything. And I called them up, and I was like, hey, can you, take my sled? And like, yeah. I was like, can you use my oil? Because I don't want to run no other oil in it. I got AMSOIL here. That's what I run. They're my title sponsor for my show. They're like, yeah, sure, we'll run in your oil. That's fine. So I thought that was pretty cool. It's one of those things I just couldn't bear the thought of not using that oil. Again, it's a great partnership I have with AMSOIL, but also it's really good stuff. So I just wanted to share that. I think that was a pretty fun thing. Also I really want to share that if you like what you're getting from this show, if you think it's adding value for your program, go ahead and leave a rating and review on iTunes, and then whatever podcast player you use, go ahead and subscribe. That would be phenomenal. Now, I want to take the next minute or so to tell you a little bit about the sponsors for the show. So we have SolderWeld. They produce game-changing metal bonding technology. TopThePodium.com. They're experts in motorsports sponsorship. Bold Racing, they're a family race team. And GSP, XTV, UTV axle specialists. Neverlift Racing, they create comfortable, race-inspired apparel. And they got new stuff coming out, which is pretty sweet. Crash Act Industries, they provide human protection and extreme racing products. And I also want to shout out some of our other partners, MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and GSP XTV. Without further ado, let's hop in. Today I'm joined by a pretty special guest. I say special guest quite a bit, but this time it's pretty special. Vipe Desai is here. He's the CEO of HDX Hydration Mix. And actually, you got a ton of other experiences. I'm not going to even try to cover all the stuff. I'm going to let you cover some of those things. So go ahead and fill in some of the gaps from that intro and tell us a little bit about you.
Awesome. Well, Josh, first off, thank you so much for having me on your show. I've listened to your other episodes and really enjoy hearing from the riders and the athletes and the brand managers. And I hope I can share some insights to help your listeners out too. But look, for me, I don't know how long your show is, so I'll keep it as short as possible, but I have had a very blessed and eclectic career. It started in my passion for surfing. Started surfing, graduated from college, got the opportunity to buy a surf shop, which I did, and got thrust into the world of entrepreneurship and did not know what I was doing whatsoever. But I had made friends with a lot of other guys that were surfers, and all of these guys were ambitious as well, not knowing what they were doing. But one of my college roommates started Volcom Clothing, and we were one of the first surf shops to carry Volcom. So that was exciting. And I also got thrust into marketing as well at that time with my surf shop. I really didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't have any schooling or education around it, but I had to kind of like just figure it out, and I did. And I became good at marketing. I had a passion for it. I loved kind of solving these problems of how to connect brands and consumers and create exciting experiences. And one of the things that I created was a contest, because I loved competition and watching surfers, and I loved snowboarding at the same time and music. So I created this surf snow contest called the H2O Winter Classic. And, you know, you had professional surfers on one day, professional snowboarders on the next, and in between was a concert with bands like Pennywise, Blink-182, 30 Seconds to Mars, Jimmy World. And little did I know how ahead of the curve I was, but that event is what inspired the Warped Tour and the X Games.
Okay. No kidding.
Yeah. And, you know, so I continued to build my marketing shops. Guys that worked for me at my shop went on to become pillars in the action sports industry as well. One of my guys co-founded Nixon Watches. Another guy started Stance Socks. So, you know, I've had all these guys that I worked with early on that have gone on to become just powerhouses in the industry. But after that, after retail, I got talked into starting a agency, a youth marketing agency with a friend of mine. And our first client was a little beverage company out of Austria. You may have heard of them, called Red Bull.
Yeah,
So,
I was hoping this story would come in at some point.
Yeah.
Too,
So in 1998,
Wow.
we were tasked with launching Red Bull here in the U.S. with their whole marketing strategy. And as you can see, it's worked out pretty good for those guys.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's listening to this show is going to have a pretty good understanding of how powerful some of these brands are in the motorsports. Red Bull, Rockstar, Monster Energy, right? They have such a big impact. But Monster and Red Bull probably more than any of the other ones, and we'll get to that more later. But you were also associated with Monster, so that's good. Okay, so keep going.
Yeah, so I did the agency thing and worked with numerous brands inside and out of the industry, being a bridge to the action sports industry and the corporate world. The whole action sports industry was blowing up. Brands outside of the industry were trying to figure out how to connect with this whole emerging market of surf, skate, snow, moto, wake, BMX. And we were one of the first agencies to help bridge that gap. So Red Bull was perfect for us. We created a little initiative for Sunglass Hut, a little private label eyewear collection that, you know, didn't get accepted, but which turned into a little brand that your listeners might be familiar with called Von Zipper back in the day. And then the other thing that happened at the agency too was that I loved surfing, but I also was, you know, just really passionate about helping other people out. And I got introduced to philanthropy, and I got to start serving on nonprofit boards. And that really changed my outlook, you know, being able to give back to organizations using my experience to help them to pursue their mission. So, you know, another thing that kind of opened up in my world was how to support nonprofits. And I've served on at least a dozen nonprofit boards since then. And, you know, after the agency, I got an opportunity to be the director of marketing for Monster Energy. And that was an exciting, you know, year and a half in my life, overseeing a $100 million marketing budget across all of our events, athletes, Monster Girls, the website, the licensing, you name it. I mean, it's just kind of came into my wheelhouse. And afterwards, I left. I wanted to start my own beverage company. I wanted to slow things down a little bit, focus on my family. My health had taken a toll, and I needed to kind of refocus. So I started my own beverage company, a healthy and environmentally friendly sports drinks mix. That's been going fun. I've been serving on other nonprofit boards, and another area is corporate boards. Corporate guys are asking me for marketing advice. I'm invited into the boardroom and, working with numerous companies. So I have my tentacles in so many different pies. It's not even funny, including getting talked into doing a podcast series last year, which I'm still doing, and also getting talked into writing a book. So no shortage of fun on my end.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I'll just explain a little bit of how we ended up connecting. I always think that's interesting how these things go down.
Yeah, I mean, I reached out to you through email, just, excited about what you were doing and what you were trying to do to help guys in the industry out. And I go, hey, it's like, I'd love to be able to, expand upon the conversation that you're having with your guests.
Yeah. So how did you find this show?
I can't remember, but I've been listening to it for, I think, a year and a half or something, off and on. And, it might have honestly been through Jim Riley.
He might have
plugged it somewhere, and then I wanted to listen to it, and then I kind of started subscribing, I think. That's what probably happened.
Yeah, okay. So that's why I like to dig into these things, because a lot of times I'll ask questions to people like, how did you make a connection with the sponsor? And they're like, it's hard to remember those things. And like, I try to probe and try to start asking those questions. And it takes a minute because you make so many connections. I remember one really good example, Thomas Affelt. He was on episode 48 of this show originally, and he runs an Instagram snowmobile account. And he told me he has a spreadsheet of at least 1,000 people that he tracks all of his connections on. And like the last conversation they had, what they talked about, and I was like, holy cow, and it's like it's serious time investment to remember or track how these connections happen and how they're sustained. And so if you found this show through Jim Riley, and you and I actually talked about Jim Riley before we even started officially recording. I met Jim Riley through Jim Beaver, and I met Jim Beaver randomly through Instagram. It's just like all these connections. It's pretty shocking how they happen. But so either way, that was a good intro. Kind of your background, helping people understand the experiences you've had. Is there anything else you want to add? Like anything else on your journey that you feel would be relevant to this audience?
I'll say one thing is that when I was younger and, I graduated from college, I loved surfing and skateboarding and snowboarding and all that stuff. But in all honesty, I had no ambition whatsoever of pursuing anything. I was just kind of like, I got to go get a job. I guess I got to go put my resume out there and see who will hire me, and not knowing what I was going to do. So honestly, for up until about 10 years ago, I would say everything just kind of fell in my lap, and doors would be presented to me, and I would just kind of walk in and pursue these opportunities. And I've been so fortunate to have made friends across so many different industries in the decision-making roles, but I've always used these opportunities to, fuel my passion for marketing and branding and sports marketing and everything. And even still to this day, I love the whole world of sports marketing and just seeing what brands do with athletes and events and how everything is changing. So I'm still a student of marketing and sports marketing on a regular basis. So I think that's something to kind of let your people know that it's like, I'm still learning, even at this old age.
I've been doing this show now for almost 2 years. Actually, we're recording this on November 28th of 2018. The 2-year anniversary is December 6th. And the more I know, I feel like the less I know, because every time I sit here and do an episode, and I'm thinking like, well, this is probably going to be the same thing, and I'm like, gosh, they just opened up my mind to something else. And it's pretty amazing how complicated and dynamic the marketing and sponsorship world can be.
Yeah, it can be. Absolutely. You're right, Josh. It's not as simple as I think it used to be. And, now there's complications, but there's also so many more different things that brands and athletes need to consider. I mean, social media and the internet changed everything, but now you look at e-commerce, that's having an effect. And now you've got, this whole new layer of, to add into your marketing about influencers and all that stuff. I mean, gosh, it's like there's so many things to think about now. It's no longer just like, okay, I got to have an ad. Oh, I got to make sure that I got, stickers, on my athletes' helmets or the bikes or the gear and all that stuff. It's so much more complicated, but it's also exciting as well, of all the things that you can do. And, I've been fortunate to work with some of the best athletes in the world, and being able to work with these guys has helped make me a better marketer and understand where they're coming from, but also to help them pursue their dreams and careers also. So it's been mutual, working with some of these athletes.
Yeah. Actually, something I've been working on with the show probably for the past 2 months or so, and I'm not sure if the general listeners have picked up on some of this strategy, but I have been picking up on more and more companies shifting to the influencer route for their marketing budget, just like you had talked about. We had a representative from Polaris Razor on recently, Evan Schendel, and he talked about that. He's like, yeah, we're shifting some of our ad spend away from, say, Facebook, and we're shifting it back towards influencers. And what I'm seeing evolve a little bit, and what I'm trying to capture with the show, is people in, like, the diesel truck world, or people in, I just purchased a Jeep, and, the Jeep world is insane with sponsorship opportunities. And I'm trying to now bring on some of those other guests. So I've had the Diesel podcast people on. I've had the Dirty Dooner podcast people on. And I'm trying to expose that audience, like, hey, look, it's no longer just racers that get this opportunity, or it's no longer just athletes that get this opportunity, because social media has opened up the influencer world to just about anybody, as long as you have a good story to tell, and people want to see it and hear it. So you have people out there, and I'll just use the Jeep community for example. They've become Instagram stars, right? And they're able to justify some pretty significant either spend reduction or discounts, like pretty deep discounts, or free parts, or actual dollars to fund their program, just because of their strength on Instagram. And that's incredible to me. So I am trying to do something with the show and say, like, look, if you're a snowmobiler, you can learn something from a Jeeper, right? Or vice versa. If you're a Jeep person, you can learn something from a snowmobiler. And guess what? You can learn something from a surfer, or any other athlete that's out there. Anybody, honestly, who's an influencer. There's things that can be learned, and that's one of the benefits, I think, of having you come on and talk about some of those examples that, honestly, they still apply. It's still the same thing, just a different industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I'm very familiar with the Jeep brand and its culture. I worked with them for a while. My wife worked for them for a while as well. And, the thing about the Jeep community is that it is a community. For the brand, there are people who are diehard Jeep fans. I don't own a Jeep, and I love Jeeps, and I love that whole culture of outdoor and adventure and everything. And, I think those Jeep owners were always influencers in some way, shape, or form. And it's just now with social media, they are able to share more of that through Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and, pursue all these other avenues. But I think that community and influencer base was always there. It's just now more amplified through these social media channels.
Mm-hmm. what's the thing that you're most excited about? Because you've got, like you said, you got a lot of tentacles out there. What are you most pumped, fired up, excited about right now?
Oh man, there's a lot of things that I'm fired up for right now. And, I would say, it's not in the industry of action sports or anything like that, but it is something that I'm using all of my marketing knowledge and relationships to disrupt a completely homogenized industry of the commercial real estate industry. That's going to sound really, really weird to your listeners, okay? But, what I've learned through action sports, I've been able to apply in other industries, whether it was the beverage industry with Red Bull, the music industry with the Blink-182 guys, the food industry with Wahoo's Fish Tacos, and even with politics as well. But, a few years ago, a couple friends of mine started a commercial real estate firm, and they wanted to just completely disrupt that industry. And I was up for the challenge, just going, yeah, that industry is so homogenized that, it could be shaken up. And man, I'm telling you, we've shaken it up. The company went from 0 to 450 million.
Wow.
And it's insane. And I'm using the same tactics as I've done, being on their board of directors and helping these guys out to grow their business. So I think what you learn in action sports and motorsports and this kind of like grassroots garage marketing, this grassroots side of things can be applied to so many different industries. And I think people in the action sports industry, and when I say action sports, I'm including the motorsports crew because they're part of that, is that they are seriously, built from a different mindset that they can go and rock any industry that they want to.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have one quick note too on just the action sports in general.
Yeah.
If people are listening to the show and you're just like, what are some of the connections? I'll give you two examples. One, go back and listen to pretty much any of the guests that have come on from, the Western United States. A lot of them started in like a BMX or a skateboarding type fashion, and then they transitioned into some sort of motorsport. These industries are very well linked. So that's one example. The second is Jim Beaver does a show, and he has a couple of shows, but one of them is called Project Action, and that's where he brings on guests from both, action sports, meaning he brings on guests from, BMX and skate and but then he also brings in motorsports people, and then he also brings on like action stars, maybe it's actors, actresses. So he lumps all those things together, and he's able to produce a very successful show. There's more linkages than there is differences.
No, absolutely. And, I'll tell you a funny story. Whenever I go to LA or New York or Washington, D.C. or Seattle, and I'm sitting with like politicians, businesses, whoever it is, I swear these guys are enamored about action sports. You name it. It's like, there's guys that I go to LA to meet with that I would never even think follow anything. And they're like, they're nerds about surfing. Okay. It's so funny how so many people follow action sports. I'll go out to New York and there's guys talking about motorsports or talking about off-road racing. And, I remember guys, who were like, hey, do you know this guy? He whips around his car all over the place and smoke comes out the back tire. And I go, you mean Ken Block? And they're like, yeah, that guy's awesome. And I'm like, I go, yeah, I know Ken. And they go, oh my God, that's my favorite video. It's so funny. And these are suit and tie guys that love that stuff. So there's definitely some mystique and interest around these sports outside of the community.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Ken Block example, because what I do when I'm trying to explain this podcast to somebody else who's not in motorsports at all, they're like, oh, okay, so what kind of guests do you have? I said, okay, well, I have a lot of different guests, but I was like, do you know, I've not had Ken Block on the show, but I'll say like, but this is the type of guest, like the most ideal guest probably is Ken Block. And if they know Ken Block, I'm like, perfect. That's enough to get me there. But if you don't, I'm like, all right, we can't talk anymore because you at least at a minimum need to know who Ken Block is. And like, that's a given. He's probably the most influential motorsports person on the planet. I initially can't think of anybody else. Even like the NASCAR guys are like, oh, Ken Block over there, or maybe if you go into some of the European countries, there might be some more popular racers out there, but I don't know. It'd be tough to top Ken Block. So if you don't know who Ken Block is, like we're gonna have a hard time being friends.
Yeah, I mean, Ken, I got great stories about Ken, and he's one of my favorite athletes that I ever got to work with. Him and Rob Dyrdek, I mean, just game changers, and being able to work with them was so exciting, and to see how far their careers have gone and where they're at now. It's pretty exciting. They're really good people to look at and try and mimic in some way, shape, or form. I mean, they're geniuses when it comes to marketing and making deals.
So I am really glad you brought up the Rob Dyrdek thing because I knew you had some association with, I guess, would be his association. But Rob Dyrdek, I don't think I've talked about this on the show. He's one of my favorite people. He has so much energy and he's so smart and so fun. I mean, obviously I have not ever met him or spent any time with him, but just from like watching some of the shows that he's produced and reading a little bit more about how he interacts with people, that guy is like he is the person that I think a lot of people would want to emulate.
Yeah, look, Rob is an amazing human being. I was very fortunate to support him and sponsor him when I was at Monster, and he and I built up a really good relationship, and he invited me to be the chairman of his foundation when we were building skate parks all across the country. And it was fantastic, but I really enjoyed the way that he worked. And like I said, it's like Rob and Ken were two of my favorite athletes. And if you look at these guys, Ken was a successful businessman turned athlete. So that was an exciting way to work with him. He got it. He was on that side that I was on, going, yeah, here's what we're going to do. And let's figure this out. So sitting with Ken was like sitting with somebody that knew business and knew what I needed to achieve with the type of budget he and I were talking about. Same thing with Rob. It's like Rob came from the athlete side, but he had that business mentality. I mean, he was all business and was constantly like coming up with ideas and different things to do. And I loved that side of him. And that's why he was so successful. I mean, you got Rob that went from a successful athlete to a successful businessman, and Ken, a successful businessman to a successful athlete. Two great stories there.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I'm sure that we'll get into a little bit more details on that stuff too later, but right now I am going to take a quick minute to thank the sponsors for this podcast. Family Race Team. Those are the first words that come to mind when I think of Bold Racing. And the next one is actually axles. Bold Racing is a premier distributor of GSP XTV axles. And if that wasn't cool enough, they just came out with an entirely new axle called the Revolution axle. It is a hollow tube axle. It's really cool. If you head over to their website, gspxtv.com, or you can find out more at boldracingltd.com, you can find out how this new axle technology works. So they are saying to view this as a fuse for your drivetrain. So the hollow tube CV axle twist technology actually increases the strength and reliability of the axle, and it also reduces stress on the drivetrain. Plus, honestly, it's super cool looking, and if people know me, they know that I really like cool looking stuff. So they come in this really cool gold color. Check it out. It's absolutely revolutionary. Two questions I get continuously about this show and about sponsorship is, do I need my own website and do I need a resume? The answer is, in my opinion, yes to both, and that's why we partner with TopThePodium.com. Now, if you want to see an example of what a professional website and what a professional resume looks like, you got to check out topthepodium.com. They did my website. The Sponsored Rider Club podcast website is sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com. That was created by Jeff Vanistall of topthepodium.com. I think it's awesome. I get a lot of good feedback about it. And there's a number of other websites out there that Jeff has produced that are just phenomenal. So I think it's important in this world of social media where you have control of your content. That's what a website does. It gives you full control. We don't know what Facebook's going to do sometimes. We don't know what Instagram's going to do. We don't know what Twitter's going to do. So if we don't have that central location to direct people and house our content, there is some risk that we incur. So I strongly recommend getting a website, talking to topthepodium.com. And then the resume, again, is massive. And if you want to stand out, get it done professionally. And honestly, it is one of the best ways to step up your game and present yourself in the best way possible.
What's up, everyone? This is Mike Pasquarella, founder of Desert Vets Racing. When the team goes racing, we always have our SolderWeld products with us. Keeping the cars in the fight is our number one concern. With SolderWeld, we can do that. SolderWeld is a leading company in the U.S. for aluminum repair. They specialize in radiator repair on the fly. If you're stuck in the middle of the trail or a race with a whole new radiator, oil pan, or canister, or even an aluminum line, you can fix it right then and there in a matter of minutes with their AMSOIL aluminum repair rods and flux. It's the only complete and lasting fix in the off-road community. SolderWeld's new UTV off-road kits fit in every ride and are easy to access on the fly.
SolderWeld continues to make a huge positive impact on this industry. So I really encourage you, get in there now. Go to solderweld.us. Check out their products because this stuff is changing the game. Look, I'm sorry, but I got to admit something. I like to look cool. I like to wear high quality clothing. I like it to be comfortable, and I also like it to portray the values that I also hold true to myself. That's why I like Neverlift Racing. So they were founded in 2013, and they are all about high quality, comfort, and looking cool. So, like I said before, exactly what I'm looking for out of clothing. Admittedly, my favorite shirt of all time is the Neverlift Racing silver badge t-shirt. Like, I wear this thing probably too often because way too many pictures of me on social media are wearing this shirt. Either way, they have a ton more out there. So go get your shirt, your hoodie, your hat, and actually your socks. Probably one of the most comfortable pair of socks I've ever owned too. And they got pretty cool things where it says never on one side, lift on the other. Really cool stuff. Get your apparel. Wear something that supports your values. Live fast, drive hard, Neverlift Racing. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? Is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races, but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out CrashAddict.com and at least see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. We are now in Heat 2. That's where we're getting all the nitty-gritty stuff. So for people who haven't heard this show before, my intent with the first round, Heat 1, the background, the introduction, build a relationship. Let's get to know the person that we're interviewing. Let's get to know why we should listen to them. All right, now this next part is let's get into the facts, the details, the tips, the suggestions. So now you got the relationship. Let's do something with that relationship. So you and I had kind of put together a couple of topics to cover today, and we've already encroached on a few of them. But the one that I wanted to start with, which we had already mentioned a little bit, is how the sponsorship world is changing. So, we mentioned a little bit earlier how social media has caused significant changes. We've talked a little bit about how businesses are shifting some of their ad spend into, influencer marketing. But let's go through the gamut here. I mean, from your perspective, what is changing in the sponsorship world?
Yeah, look, for athletes, the sponsorship world is changing. And, one of the things is that there is a flood of athletes than there were before.
Mm-hmm.
So, you look at it from an economic perspective, and it's like supply exceeds demand.
Mm-hmm.
Brands can only sponsor so many people before they get to the point of diminishing returns. I think we're seeing that with the large funders in the motorsports world, like Red Bull and Monster and Rockstar. It's like they don't need to put any more money into athletes. They've
Mm-hmm.
already kind of maxed out. Another $1 million isn't going to help them sell any more product.
Mm-hmm.
They have to start looking outside of the market and start doing different things. So I think one thing is there is a flood of good athletes out there. And that's a good thing. And that's also a challenge for athletes as well. So the competition is not just on the track or in the competitive environment. It's also, when you're not racing or competing, it's like just trying to get in with the sports marketing manager to get him to look at you. It's like there's 500 people that he's got,
Mm-hmm.
coming to him. So that's one challenge. There's a flood of athletes. Yeah, there's more expectations on athletes. Before is that, it was just kind of like, hey, go race and get on the podium and make sure that, you got the products and everything lined up and, for photos. And if the media wants to talk to you, make sure you give us a shout out. If you get on the podium, give us a shout out. But now it's like, what are you doing when you're not racing? Are you shooting photos? Are you doing videos? Are you doing the social media thing? Do you have followers? What are you doing
Mm-hmm.
outside of that to build value for your sponsors? So it's no longer just, representing the brand on the track. It's also representing them off the track and online and in every form possible. So, there's a lot more work that goes into it now than I would say, was going on 10 or 15 years ago. And I think some athletes need to, keep that in mind, is that there's a lot more competition, but there's also a lot more demands on athletes too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the areas, where the sponsorship world is changing.
Yeah, those are two really good points. And this is something that I actually think about quite a bit. The flood of athletes also does connect directly to social media, because social media now is becoming more flooded. It's becoming harder and harder for any influencer or any brand to get their message out there, because there are so many messages, and most people are viewing them on a 7-inch screen or whatever the size of their phone is, and you can only fit one message at a time. And I think that one of the ways the industry has responded is by niching further and further down to say, I guess I'll continue. We talked a little bit about Jeeps earlier, so I'll continue on that trend. So you could say, all right, well, you've got action sports. Okay, well, action sports might have a version of it that's motorsports, and motorsports might have a version of it that is off-road vehicles, and then off-road vehicles has a version of it that is specific to Jeep. So if someone is targeting just people who are Jeep-focused people, then, yeah, you're probably going to get some more screen time. But once you start backing that out again, you're like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to get as much screen time now with my audience. So I think that's been one response. But even that, I'll just encourage anybody, if you want to get overloaded, go on Instagram and type in hashtag Jeep. It's just crazy. You can't consume all that content.
No, it's hard to consume all that content, and it makes it very much more difficult for brand managers as well. And, that's part of their job. It's finding those athletes that stand out. So, for athletes, I don't, anybody that's listening that's an athlete, I don't want to discourage them with what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, look, there's a lot more competition. So you really have to think about your personal brand and how do you stand out and what does that include? And it's, some of it is like, okay, great, you race, that's fine. But are you also giving back to your community? What are you doing for others? How are you helping the sport grow? Are you working with your sponsors and their marketing and sales team as well? There's so many different things that athletes can pursue. It's no longer, like I said, just, racing and competition day and leaving it at that. It's 24/7, 365 if you want to be an athlete in this day and age. And even then, it's not guaranteed that you're going to make the salary that you deserve, just because of the competition.
Yeah, one thing that I'll share too, and I've actually gotten some of this feedback from businesses who either listen to the show or, there's a number of businesses who sponsor the show too. But just the simple fact of you listening to this show it's giving you a leg up, meaning it's showing that you are taking time to invest in yourself and you're putting actual effort into trying to improve your sponsorship program. And so, for example, one of the companies that has been sponsoring the show for probably about a year and a half now is SolderWeld. And that was one of the things that they said, like, we wanted to come on the show. We want to sell more product. That was part of it, but their initial idea was to find out who the dedicated, growth-oriented off-road racers were that were listening to the show, because just by them listening, that was showing that they're investing in in themselves. And then they wanted to target those people for their sponsorship program. So they wanted to relate their brand with off-road racers who are trying to grow and constantly get better. So I just want to reiterate the point that, yes, this is a challenging world, but that's also why we can dedicate 120 some odd episodes to this and not run out of things to talk about, because there are a lot of different ways of standing out.
Absolutely. You're right. There's so many different things that athletes can do. And it's a matter of, if you're an athlete that's pursuing a career in motorsports or any sport, are you willing to go above and beyond the call of duty than what might be spelled out in your contract?
Yeah. I want to use this to transition into this next question, because it could be some linkages to contracts too, but or at least maybe I'll add some notes on that. But why do you think it is that athletes might miss big opportunities?
Yeah, look, that's a really good transition. Look, I would say this is that with athletes, I think what happens is that they kind of get tunnel vision, and their tunnel vision is just, what do I need to do that is within my contract, and just fulfill that. I think to be a successful athlete in your sport, you have to understand the way the industry works. And I think a lot of athletes don't understand the way the industry works. So you got to fully understand that. What is the role of media and retail and brands and events and athletes and everything that is made up of that ecosystem? It's not just being an athlete and going, hey, my sponsor wants this, and I don't really know anything about how they conduct business or anything like that. You've got to understand how the business works. And that's one of the things that I always pursued in my career with any venture. It's like, when I got in the surf industry, I wanted to know everything about it, everything, because I needed that knowledge to create advantages for me and open up opportunities. When I started working with Red Bull to help launch them here in the U.S., I dove into learning about the beverage industry, every aspect, the retailers, the players, the distribution model, the do's and don'ts and everything. I mean, that's one of the things that I've seen from my perspective in working with more than 500 athletes over my career, is that so many of them miss out on understanding the industry that they are in and understanding how it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will. I'll tell you this too, and talking to a lot of businesses that, share what they're looking for from a sponsorship standpoint, they have made it pretty clear that some of the same things you highlighted about Rob Dyrdek and Ken Block, about being savvy business people, that's a very attractive trait. So AMSOIL is the title sponsor for this show, and Kevin Kastner is one of my primary contacts there. And he is also a pretty savvy marketer and business person. And he explained to me an example of how, one of their programs was targeting Western United States oil sales. And they went after a partnership with a company called 509, which they make, motorsports gear. But they are very strong out in the Western United States. So they had a partnership, for a video and a couple of other promotional items. But he was telling me, look, if someone came up to me and could even just ask the questions about why does this partnership exist with 509, what's your strategy behind it, and how can I help? That alone is showing that you are conscious of these individual efforts that companies are making, and that you're thinking of the bigger picture and how you might be able to, hit that, or you might be able to support that goal. So if you're thinking that way and you walk up, or you send an email to, or you have a phone call with a potential sponsor, I guarantee you there's going to be positive feedback from that interaction.
Oh, absolutely. Look, there's this kind of gray area, I think, that sometimes athletes and event producers, don't necessarily want to, explore. I think sometimes athletes are just like, hey, it's like, I'm a really good athlete and I'm respected amongst my peers and people really like me and they say good things about me, and, you should sponsor me because of that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Or event guys are like, we have the raddest event. Everybody loves coming to our event and they have a good time and all that stuff. Look, the guy that's writing the check, the marketing guy, in his mind, he's thinking, how is this going to help me move the needle? Is this going to result in sales? And look, sales drives sponsorship. Okay. That's the pure, simple fact. Mm-hmm. Athletes are salespeople. Okay. Event guys, if we're sponsoring an event, you are helping us to sell our product in some way, shape, or form. That's what it comes down to. And I think, that's where, you touched upon it, and, it kind of goes into my answer, is that, they don't fully understand the industry, athletes. And if you don't understand the industry, you can't operate like a business. Mm-hmm. Athletes should operate like a business. They should look at everything, their marketability. Brands love the full package. If they've got to come in and run your marketing and PR and social media and content and all that stuff, they're just going to look at it and go, gosh, do we have the time and energy and money to do that? Mm-hmm. Whereas a guy like Rob Dyrdek or Ken, these guys come to me and they got a full media plan, everything, soup to nuts. I mean, I look at that and I go, yep, that makes sense. I like this. Okay, timing wise, let me go back, talk to my sales guys and see what's going on their calendar with new product coming out, any sales push and all that stuff. And then I come back and I go, guys, we need to move this campaign out to this date, and I need it to tie into this retailer, and I need you guys to do these appearances and everything. And they would just be like, yeah, no worries, done. We get it. So, pursuing that. And I think the third point I'd make is that, once you become a successful athlete that has achieved that elite status, knowing that you can, knowing to strike while the iron is hot on other deals. Mm-hmm. A lot of times these guys will be, reach that elite level and they won't understand how to use that level that they've peaked in to do other deals that will create longevity to their career or set them up for things outside of their career or after their career.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. And actually, that comment sparked a thought that I had for one of the one of the listeners for the show, that they reached out and they said, hey, I've got a few questions, maybe you could ask them one of your upcoming shows. Because what you just talked about is like, you get to a certain point where you've had success and you might not know what to do next and you have to branch off, you got to think long term. But one of these questions that came in, and I'm going to summarize a little bit, but essentially they're trying to say, backing that up to when they're first starting, how do you know when you have enough experience to put that information on your resume and start going after some of the bigger companies? And what that means is, like, we have a lot of examples of some of the smaller scale companies that they are ready to make deals without contracts. They're ready to support local riders and racers. They're ready to grow with you, and you can do that and build that program. But what do you do when you're ready to then contact some of these bigger industries, in which case you might be, one or two people out of maybe 2,000 people in a company or whatever it may be. So what's your thoughts on that? When do you think is the right time when someone can approach some of these bigger companies?
I would say that it's not a matter of approaching these companies. These companies will approach you
mm-hmm.
when you're ready to fit into their plan.
Mm.
The large companies don't pursue, just any athlete. I think in this day and age, very few of them want to be sent resumes and portfolios and all that stuff. These guys, at least I did. I know when I was with Monster and other brands and everything, working with them, and I think these other brands do the same thing, but they send out their category managers to look at what's going on. So we would go to events, we'd look at what's going on, we'd talk to our athletes, we'd see who our athletes were hanging out with, we'd listen to who our athletes were talking about and saying, hey, it's like, you should talk to this guy. I think they're going to be something really good and they'd be good for your company. It's that reference, that word of mouth, and that validation from your peers and other respected people. So, if you're trying to go after a larger brand by saying, hey, I now have the accolades and I'm ready to go talk to a Red Bull or a Monster or a Rockstar or a GoPro or Jeep or whoever, the thing is, those guys are going to come to you when they know you're ready. And they're ready for you. It's not the other way around. So, you got to just keep grinding to do your thing and, become friends with the other elite athletes, the ones that are sponsored, and show them that you can be a team player and that, you're good to, you want to work, you want to get to the point where, they will, speak highly of you and introduce you to their sponsors and say, this is a guy you guys should be talking to. We would have that all the time. I mean, hands down, I'll tell you, here's a perfect athlete. I'll tell you, we went to Formula Drift, and, checking out Formula Drift, and we were looking at a couple of athletes and, talking to probably 7 or 8 different teams. And we had settled on 1 or 2 teams going, hey, we really like these guys' program and we've heard good things about them and we think that they'd be a good fit for us. And we were talking to them and people around them, their other sponsors, to kind of get a feel for, what they'd be like. And, all of a sudden, like, Ken Block, calls me up and calls us up and he's like, hey, I know you guys are thinking about Formula Drift. I got a guy that I'd really like for you guys to look at that I like. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Who is it? And it was Vaughn Gittin Jr.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, Ken. I go, are you kidding me? I go, a reference from you is fantastic. So we met with Vaughn and Abby, his now wife, and we loved, what he was up to. And then Ken was telling us all the things that DC liked about him. And Rob then got involved and was like, hey, I'm going to have, Vaughn on one of my shows too, because I really like what he's about. It'd be great if he was in the Monster family. And, dude, for us, that was a done deal.
Right. Wow.
Having two great athletes do that for you, go out of their way to say, look, we really like this guy. I mean, all these other guys are great, but, if you're still open to looking at another athlete, here you go. And look, Vaughn's worked out fantastic for Monster. So I think to the question that your listener posed, I think it's the brands will find you when you're ready for that level.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And there's examples that we've had on this show too, where people have said the same thing, right? They've said, because I asked a question, I say, how do you connect, or how do you make initial contact, or whatever? And a lot of times they'll say, I didn't. I just did my thing and presented myself as best as I possibly could, and they reached out to me. And, there's something to be said there. I'll give two examples of that just to put some validity behind it. One is based off of the conversation that I had with Evan Schindel of Polaris Razor. So he is one of the marketing reps there. He came on, and then one of the marketing interns came on the show who's also an off-road racer, and that's Shelby Anderson, but she also works at Polaris. And they both basically said, we see everything. That was a big point that Evan was making. We see everything. I watch, I pay attention to everything. And you're like, well, what does that mean? It basically means that if you're present on social media, if you're present at an event, he's paying attention. And he'll find companies or businesses or brands or people or racers or athletes that interest him and start tracking. Maybe it's nothing initially. Maybe he tracks for a year. Maybe it's 2 years. Or maybe he doesn't find that interest and moves on. But he basically said, I see everything. So that's a good point of where, at some point, if he sees what he likes and maybe he gets some of those additional references, now he's reaching out to you. And that's a good position to be in. So that's one example. Another one, which I've definitely shared in the show before, is AMSOIL again. So AMSOIL reached out to me and they said, we have been watching you and your show for quite some time now. I had no idea, right? I didn't know how that happened. At the time, I didn't. And that was just part of it. They said, we feel that what you're doing now and where you've grown to now aligns with what we're trying to accomplish with our branding and with our strategy and the people we're trying to reach. And great. It worked out that way. But I couldn't have predicted that either. Now, I was fortunate. I was already a pretty big fan of AMSOIL, but maybe that played into it too, right? If I'm always using their products anyways, then that's just one additional, connection point. But
yeah, what I would add to that is that, I think, those are two great examples. And I would say, relating to your story and with AMSOIL, is that I think that you were already behaving and operating in a manner that you were sponsored by a brand already. So for them, it was easy just going, God, this guy already behaves and operates in a way as if he is being sponsored. Imagine what he could do if we support him a little bit. So I would tell athletes that behave and operate in a way that you already, have these big sponsors. Show them that you're ready to, represent them by your actions and your deeds and what you do. Yeah. And that's what is going to attract people to you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I take notes. People don't probably know this unless you really pay attention to some of my Instagram shots, but I take vigorous notes throughout these things. I'm definitely writing that one down. And I got to remember to bring that up more often. Behave as if you are already sponsored, whether you are or not. Behave that way, because that you're going to attract the attention that you want.
Yep, absolutely.
Good. Well, I might go through here and ask a couple of other questions before we kind of round things out. One of the things that you and I had kind of talked about ahead of time that we'd cover in the show is about brands in general. Now, a number of people who listen to the show and who follow the show have their own brands, and there's a number of them that actually sponsor their own riders and racers and other influencers. So there's a sub-segment of people who will, they sell the products that they run, or they have other racers that run their products and they race as well. So this question, you had initially brought it up to me, and I think it's very interesting. So how can marketing managers, or in this case some of these small business owners, be more effective with their sponsorship dollars?
Yeah, look, as we said earlier, sponsorship is becoming more and more challenging. And, when you take the large brands that are out there, you can't meet the same marketing dollars that they can bring to the table. They might have $1 million to spend on an initiative, and you might only have 10,000. Mm-hmm. Which is a very big difference. I mean, that's like, bringing a feather to a gunfight. Mm-hmm. It's hard to do. The thing that I like most is, look, as brands, the small guys, you got to get scrappy and you got to get creative. I have found that, when I work with an athlete, I find out what they need most, what would help them most. And in some instances, what happens is these guys are just like, if I could get a GoPro camera and somebody to edit videos for me, I know I could get to the next level. And I would buy these guys GoPro cameras, okay, and then pay somebody to edit their videos for them, just to help them get going. So it's like, it's not a lot of money, but it's something where you go, look, I want to help you out, and I can't help you out a whole lot, but here's what I can do that I think will help you and me out at the same time. So, thinking of ways of like, what are the other ways you can add value to an athlete that is outside of the realm of just hard cash, hard salary and things of that nature. The other thing too is that teaming up with other brands and combining your marketing money together with an athlete. If there's two brands that like working with an athlete, hey, what can we do with this athlete together? And, maybe we can take a little bit of my budget and a little bit of your budget and kind of put something together that really satisfies the athlete, like a 2-for-1 deal, and do something really exciting. I did that several times with brands, and one of the big ones was with Billabong. Mm-hmm. Billabong would come to me at Monster, and they would say, look, we really like this event, and we're a little short on our, resources, but, I think together we can make something really cool happen. What do you think? I'd sit down with them, we talk about it, and all of a sudden it's like we'd figure out what each of us is contributing to this effort, and, we found ourselves sponsoring an amazing event together.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I feel like that over the past 5-10 years has become more and more accepted. So my day job, I work at a tier 1 automotive supplier, and the number of joint ventures that they have become a part of over the past 5 years has been pretty incredible. And I think we're seeing a lot more companies, working together in that same way. But that's pretty cool, especially from like the small business aspect, because there's probably a lot of opportunities there that we may not always think about. I really like that.
Yeah, you got to get creative with your marketing budget. And look, I would encourage athletes as well to think about how to get creative. Marketing dollars, hard dollars, are very, very hard to come by for brands, especially smaller ones. But if you can, go to a sponsor and say, look, I need this money, but I might not get it now, but here's what would help me even more so. And can we work something out where you help me with this, whether it's getting some video equipment or editing capability or hiring a photographer for me, and we can share the content to help each other out. And, my other sponsors will be really appreciative of this, and they'll share it on their social media, which will promote your brand and help promote me. Can we talk about that? So I think there's an opportunity for athletes. Like I said earlier, think like a business. If you're a marketer, how can you work with the marketing budgets of your sponsors, what little you have, what resources they have, combine them together, bring them together and say, I got an idea. Can we do this together? Hey, I think you'll find people willing to try something new. And I think they'll be really impressed that you're thinking out of the box instead of just like, here's my resume and I need this much money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are really good, tangible piece of advice. The last real category that I wanted to cover as part of the Heat 2 is around event producers. Now, we've had a couple of people come on this show specifically to talk about the ins and outs of, how do you prepare to attend an event, how do you staff an event, and how do you potentially put on an event. And that is a segment where people listening to the show, they either are a guest or somebody featured at an event, or they have a booth that's set up. And in some cases, although it is smaller, they would actually create and manage and market an event. So my question here is, how do event producers create value that both athletes and brands need in order to thrive in a consumer-rich environment?
Yeah, look, I love events. I still produce a few here and there, but I've gotten out of the sports event business after a few years. But it's challenging and yet exciting at the same time. Look, I think one of the biggest things for event producers is really creating an amazing experience for athletes and for consumers. Those are the two big drivers in events, because you need the athletes that are going to create the excitement that consumers are going to want to see. Okay. And then you're going to create the environment where consumers are going to be just inundated with the experiential stuff that's going on around it. And that's where brands are going to come in and support this effort. And, I would say that, look, I've been involved with small events and all the way up to, helping do the deal with Feld and Supercross. So all the stadium stuff as well, looking at what goes on there. But it's creating those really exciting experiential events. And once again, being able to utilize your athletes, any sort of consumer experience is great. But, one event that I think right now is doing an amazing job, and I love what these guys are doing, is you might know the Matt and Josh Martelli with the Mint 400. Those guys are really doing something spectacular with the Mint 400. I love that event, what they're doing for the athletes. They're helping them to tell better stories and take those stories outside of the course and online and into media. And then as you're a consumer, you go to the event and you get to see all the, trucks lined up and everything, and meet the athletes and engage with them and everything. So it's a really rich environment to interact and engage. And look, as I said earlier, brands want to sell products. And if you give consumers an amazing experience, they will remember the brands and the events that gave them that. So I think that's one of the things, is creating those experiences with athletes and consumers and really focusing on that more than anything.
Yeah, that's huge. I want to share a couple of examples real quick on this one. I went to Heydays for the first time, surprisingly, this year. Now, Heydays is the biggest snowmobile event in the world. 50,000 people over a course of a weekend out in Minnesota in the middle of nowhere, essentially. And I saw a couple of companies do a few things that were very interesting. One was Climb. So Climb is a pretty popular gear manufacturer, mostly for snowmobiling. They had this agility course set up, kind of like I can't remember the name of it now, Ninja Warrior. They had this elaborate thing where, you would have to come and try to do these things, and they had their athletes there representing them, doing these, very elaborate, something you need a lot of skill and strength to do, but tons of people were doing it, and it was creating this experience that I thought was, let's just say it grabbed attention from just about everybody, and you wanted to participate. So I thought that was a pretty cool example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's experiences, because look, when you go to an event, think about what happens. There's a lot of downtime as well. Mm-hmm. And when there's downtime, consumers can get bored. It can be hot. They could drift away from the experience and everything. But if you keep them engaged and you're able to get your sponsors to engage with them, it really, creates an amazing experience. And, look, I think the Feld guys do an amazing job, and it was wonderful working with that team when we were looking to add excitement in the pits. You go to Monster Supercross and you see what goes on in the pits now and everything. All the brands are activating, and it's almost as exciting as what goes on inside the stadiums. And that's because of the consumer experience, whether it's from the teams or the sponsors. But Feld really, wanted to champion that, and they worked with the brands to encourage that and get them to think differently.
Yeah. There's one other quick example I want to share on that, and it's going back to what you said about Matt and Josh Martelli. They've both been on the show. If people want to hear that episode, I highly encourage it because they were both phenomenal. If you go on to my website, sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com, just search Martelli, you'll see both of their episodes pop up. But specifically, I want to talk about the Mint 400 that you brought up. The Mint 400 off-road race, it's iconic, but there was a period in time in which there wasn't much happening with it at all. And the Martelli brothers bought that brand, bought the event with the intent of making it like the most popular. That's their vision, making it the most popular motorsports event in the United States and in probably the world. That vision, though, and I'm just going to put this out there, like that's the thing that's driving them to make all of these investments and improvements. That vision isn't, I want to have a good event, I want to have a good turnout. It's like, no, I want to have the best event. And I think for anybody who's trying to put together, some sort of event, if you view it from that lens, I guarantee your results are going to be better than if you don't have that long-term vision in mind.
No, absolutely. I think the Mint 400 is a great example and template for other event producers to look at, no matter what size your event is or what sport or whatnot. It's like, I think that's a great event. I remember when Matt and Josh bought that event, they told me about their vision, and I saw it. And I'll tell you, out of all the motorsports events that I've been to and follow, from NASCAR to MotoGP to off-road racing and all that stuff, the Mint 400 is one of my favorite motorsports events. I mean, it is a gold mine for opportunities, for brands, for athletes, for consumers. I mean, it's a great package. It's super exciting.
Yeah, that's great to hear, especially from someone who isn't fully ingrained in off-road all the time. To hear that lauded is a big testament to what the Martelli brothers have done.
Yeah, and not just with the Mint 400. I mean, you look and see the work that they did with Polaris with their video content and everything. I mean, it's like they replicated some of that Gymkhana theory into that, and look at what they've done for the UTV community.
Mm-hmm. It's massive. It truly is
massive.
The Gymkhana, when they produced that with Ken Block, that changed, in my opinion, the virality of social media content or content in general. I felt like that was one of the breaking points. It was very obvious a breaking point for motorsports, but just in general of like viral content, I thought that was one of the game changers. And then I feel like they've, like you were saying with Polaris and with the XP1K series with RJ Anderson, who's also been on the show, they've taken that into the UTV world, and I, in my opinion, really blown away any of the other content that I'd seen, from a viral off-road focused content.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to put another shameless plug in here, but go through, actually, if you're listening for the first time, just download all of the episodes. Why not? But at a minimum, go back and listen to the Martelli Brothers episodes, because they tell you their thought process behind creating Gymkhana and creating the XP1K series. It's pretty interesting how they take, and actually the way the Martelli Brothers work, Matt is the visionary, and Josh is the get stuff done person. So they play in the clouds and the dirt. Matt is the clouds and Josh is the dirt. You need both, especially if you listen to Gary Vee at all. Gary Vaynerchuk says you got to be in the clouds and the dirt, and that's how they get it done. Either way, those two intrigue me very much, which is probably coming across as pretty obvious. But, well, hey, we're actually running pretty tight on time. Honestly, I've lost track of time, which is not unusual, but it happened. But I want to try this new thing here with you. I'm testing the lightning round on you. It's a new version of the main event, the lightning round. You prepared for this? You ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready.
All
I'm
right,
in the driver's seat.
I haven't. These aren't even completely new questions, but I think if I put the word lightning in front of it, it makes it fancy. If you could sponsor anyone in the world, who would you choose and why?
Oh, that's easy. It's guys like Ken Block and Rob Dyrdek. I wouldn't necessarily say either one, but both. I love the way they operate, and any athlete that operates in the same manner, I think I would want to support in some way, shape, or form and sponsor. It's just they get it. They get the grassroots. They get the vision. They get being part of the brand, helping drive sales, creating excitement with consumers, and energizing the brand. I mean, they are perfect examples of the perfect athlete, and anyone can replicate what those guys do.
No, that's perfect. If you could use only one social media platform, which would you choose and why?
Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm forced to keep it short, limited to the characters. I think there's always an opportunity to say too much, but Twitter, 280 characters or less. That's it. You know.
That's awesome. Yeah, the Twitter world has been, for some reason, harder for off-road and snowmobilers to lock down. I think that the off-road people and the snowmobile people have thrived in the highly visual Instagram world, but I would love to see this group break into Twitter. You see, I think NASCAR has done well with Twitter, and even I say Supercross has done well with Twitter, but some of the pure UTV off-road and snowmobilers have just not been able to crack it. So I'm glad you said that, because I'm hoping that people will now go and follow you on Twitter and pay attention to some of the ways that you might use it. That wasn't very lightning. That was a lot of me talking, and not very lightning.
What else you got? Come on, I'm ready. Come on.
Who has been your biggest supporter?
Oh man, my wife and my son have been my biggest supporters. But I've also, been very fortunate to become friends with some really great people. One gentleman, Bob McKnight, he's the founder of Quicksilver. Mm-hmm. Former CEO. He's been really good to me, has kept me under his wing for so many years, and always counsels me, and just love having his support. But I try my best to surround myself with great people so I can continue to be inspired on a regular basis. And whether it's a young athlete or an established athlete or an entrepreneur or anything, I get inspired from all types of people that just kind of emit passion about what they're doing.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, we're going to close things out now at the finish line. if there's anything that you wanted to just sum up, if everybody listening forgot completely 99.9% of what we talked about, if there's one thing they could take away, what would that be?
Knowledge is power. You want to be a successful athlete or a brand manager or an entrepreneur or anything, knowledge is power. Learn as much as you can about your industry, not just your business, but the entire industry, and I guarantee you will go far.
Perfect. Well, what's the best way that we can connect with you? I'm assuming that Twitter is going to be part of this too.
Yeah. Look, Instagram, I'm active on Instagram. I'm active on Twitter as well. Not so active on Facebook. I hate Facebook.
There's more and more of that happening lately.
Yeah, I hate Facebook, but LinkedIn too. I love hearing from other people that are pursuing their careers in any way I can help. So LinkedIn is always a great place. And, if you want to reach out to me, my email is Vipe, VIPE at HDXmix.com. Blow me up. Always love connecting with people. And I'm going to do my first shameless plug. Okay, so after everybody listening has downloaded all of Josh's podcasts, okay, I'd love it if you would think about listening to my podcast, which is called Army of Game Changers. And what I have done is I have wrangled amazing people from my history to come onto my podcast to share their best career and leadership insights. So whether you're an athlete, somebody working in the action sports industry, motorsports industry, whatever it is, I guarantee, I think you're going to love hearing about from some of my guests, from the president of Oprah Winfrey Network to Jim from Pennywise to the former Secretary of Defense. There's some exciting people who drop amazing knowledge that I think will help you and inspire your careers.
So I don't usually address my guests or my listeners directly, but Scott Sparrow, if you're listening to this one, this sounds like your podcast. Like, go and download it, buddy. For people who don't know, Scott was on episode 70, and he has his own show called Driven, and he eats up anything like this. So he, like, Scott, buddy, go download it. Let's see it happen. All right, well, perfect. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights. I appreciate you even reaching out in the first place, because this is fantastic for me. But we got to close things out, so I'm going to leave you with this. Have fun and ride safe.
Hey, thanks for having me on your show, but game on. I'm going to be competing with your recent guest. Is it Pleasant?
Yes.
Cook? Yeah,
yep.
She's been on your show 4 times, so
that's right.
Competition's on. I hope you invite me back.
Nice. I like it. She will love that too, because she's been competing with Jim Beaver, because he was the first 3-peat guest, and then she was like, I'm gonna be a 3-peat. She's like, can I do it again? I was like, yes, you can.
Hey, maybe what we can be is the first group podcast with Jim, Pleasant, and I, and just doing this lightning round with each other.
That would be something. That would be fun. That would be pretty fun, man. That got me excited there.
Okay, I'm calling out Jim and Pleasant to, push you for that.
I like it. That's perfect.
I had fun. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the sponsored Rider Club podcast. Go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and leave a rating and review. All those things are phenomenal. Follow us on social media, specifically our Facebook page. That's where we do our live shows. We've got Jared Heshka coming up in December. Also, I want to invite you personally to come check out the Sponsored Rider Club group on Facebook. It is a great forum to ask questions about your program. There's always a lot of helpful people there to respond, give you advice, give you tips, things like that. A special thanks goes out to our sponsors, AMSOIL, Neverlift Racing, SolderWeld, Bold Racing, TopThePodium.com, Crash Addict Industries, and I also want to shout out some of our other partners, GSP XTV Axles, MBRP, HMK USA, and Studboy Traction. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.